I see this guy on here. It's like, who's this dude? Listen to this.
Since Elon and Doge are looking at Medicare for easy cuts, I thought I could help. The medication is dimethyl fumarate, and Medicare paid for the prescription 155,000 times in 2022. On average, they paid $3,800 each, which means that they spent $590 million on just one drug in just 1 year. But at my pharmacy that doesn't use insurance, that prescription only costs $65.
What?
If all 155,000 prescriptions were filled at that price, it would have cost $10 million total. So Medicare overpaid by $580 million on just that one drug in only 1 year.
Good Lord. Brad Hart from the Forest Park Pharmacy there in Fort Worth. Sorry we don't have Glenda on rather than you, your wife. I watched this. I was like, what the heck? You've been, pounding this drum for a long time, Brad. And finally, it looks like some people are starting to think, what's this guy in Fort Worth doing these numbers? You stand by all this, that the government is overpaying on all these drugs?
Oh, yeah, by a mile. I mean, you can hear the percentage on those. It's outrageous. And a couple committees, like the GOP Committee for Congressional Spending, they did a huge report. The FTC did a huge report. So there's massive numbers. Congress knows how much they're spending on these medications, and it's all over the place. Absolutely.
Here's the other part you said. You go on to explain why he's able to provide these drugs. You say,
so how can I offer it at such a ridiculously discounted price? It's not magic. That's just the real price. The only reason Medicare is paying that much is because the pharmacy benefits manager that Medicare uses to tell them how much to pay for prescriptions is lying. They do that because they make more money if the medications cost more. If that sounds like an obvious conflict of interest that we could solve by just getting rid of a middleman, you'd be right. So let's do that. Cancel the PBM contracts and let's save some money. I got some more bad news, though.
Uh-oh.
Your insurance also uses a PBM, and they also rip you off. If you want to see if you're paying too much for your prescription, go to forestparkpharmacy.com to look at our price checker.
Okay, so Brad, explain to everybody in layman's terms exactly how this works. So the doctor says, I got to take a drug, right? So then the doctor says, go ahead and fill it. So I go to my pharmacy. I used to have a local small pharmacy in Cle Elum, but that guy told me the reimbursement rate from Medicare was just too low. He couldn't make any money. So now Safeway has it. So I go to Safeway, and then they say, oh, you've got this drug. You've got to get the doctor's prescriptions on there. Now, explain to me what's happening behind the scenes when it comes to those prices.
Sure. So once you get that prescription into the pharmacy, they're going to run it through your insurance, and the insurance is going to tell them what your copay is, and they're going to tell them what they're going to pay the pharmacy for that. Now, like your small independent pharmacy found out, they aren't paying enough. That's the PBM. They decide how much the pharmacy gets paid, how much the patient pays at the checkout. But the other part that most people don't understand is that after those two transactions, they also tell the employer, the person who's paying the bill. So that would be for Medicare and Medicaid. That'd be the government. They tell them how much they need to pay. So there's two parts of the payment. There's the copay, which the patient pays, and then there's the actual payment, which the insurance payer pays. That's where the outrageous costs happen. They're hidden from us, right? So where do those outrageous costs come back to the patient? That's in our premiums. Okay, so they hide these costs from patients. Patients have no idea what the actual cost of the medication is. They only see the copay, and then they can just go astronomical with those prices. And the way that they go astronomical is they use a metric. It's called AWP. That stands for average wholesale price. That sounds like a perfectly good metric to figure out how much a medication costs. Unfortunately, it's totally fictional. So like the drug that we talked about there, dimethyl fumarate, it's going to have an $8,000, $10,000 AWP, even though at the wholesaler, I actually purchased it for $60. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just totally fictional, and it's the PBM that's telling them all these prices. Now, the reason that the PBM, the pharmacy benefits manager, that's Express Scripts, CVS Caremark, Optum Pharmacy, the reason that they are telling them these astronomical prices is because they get a percentage of the savings. Right. So if the price is super high, then they can say, hey, let's save you 40% by using our program. Then they get a percentage of that savings. So the higher the price is, the higher amount of money that the PBM earns.
And ultimately, every taxpayer is paying for that because it's Medicaid, Medicare. It's the government stepping in to pay the bill, and they don't necessarily really care about what the cost is. So everybody on the backside of that is making money on it by having the incredibly high price, and now you get some savings in there. So you've been in this for how long? You and your wife, been running this little pharmacy there in Fort Worth?
About 2 years.
Okay.
And we opened up with insurance, and they paid us less than the cost of the medication for 4 months, which is why we decided to switch to this cost plus model, which is where we don't use insurance. So they were like running us out of business, which is exactly what happened to your independent pharmacy.
Right. So those little pharmacies, so they were not getting reimbursed enough to cover the cost of turning on the lights. Do they want the little pharmacies, little independent guys, to basically go out of business?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason is obvious. They own pharmacies. So they get these really high prices on these medications like we just talked about. And then they either pay the pharmacy that much. If it's their pharmacy, they pay them 10 times, literally between 3 and 10 times as much than they would pay a pharmacy like mine. And so the pharmacy can keep it. But if they're paying like a small pharmacy like mine less, then they use a technique called spread pricing, which is where they tell the employer or the government that a medication would cost $1,000 to fill. Then they'll pay the pharmacy $5. And so that spread they keep for themselves.
Wow. So if the drug company or the health insurance company owns the pharmacy, they're basically paying themselves by padding that price, and it's just coming back onto their bottom line. And then little competition like Cleveland Pharmacy, now out of business, is out of business, and they don't have to worry about those, folks around the edge making some noise. So it's just all going back into the insurance companies that have worked out this scam is basically what it is. So what do you hope to see, and what do you think will happen? I know in 2017, I think it was Trump wanted to have transparency when it came to pricing, and then the Biden administration ignored that, tried to fight it, and didn't implement it. It was a law that they had to do this. And then finally, the Biden administration said, "Well, we're gonna make it really obvious about certain things, regarding, we're gonna do price controls." But they were still not transparent on this sort of stuff. So, what do you want to see, Brad Hart from Forest Park Pharmacy? What would you like to see happen?
Well, PBM reform is a huge topic right now. It's been all over.
PBM stands for what?
Pharmacy benefits managers. That's these guys that are controlling the pharmacy end of insurance. So they're really working to get PBM reform through Congress, and Trump has said that he's for it also. So PBM reform is likely going to happen, and they're going to have all kinds of fixes. They're going to say that the pharmacies can't be underpaid. They're going to say spread pricing can't happen. They're going to say they can't overcharge for medications. They're going to answer a lot of these questions in that PBM reform. But ultimately, I don't think that that's going to help. The problem is they're in charge of 10,000 elements of our health coverage. So they can just plug a hole anywhere they want. For instance, we have rebates. That's a big reason that our medication costs so much. They raise the cost, and then they get a rebate. They pay themselves back. And people found out that they were keeping the rebates themselves. So all the employers negotiated. They said, give us the rebate. That's our savings that we should get. So they gave it to them. So how did they get around that and earn more income? They said, oh, actually, it's this other company, the group purchasing organization, that's doing that negotiating. So they're going to get a fee now. So we eliminated one problem, and they created a solution to get their income back in place. And I think that's what we're going to see with PBM reform. We're going to have an answer for all the problems that we see right now, and then they'll create a new problem for us in the future. Personally, what I think the solution is, we don't need the PBM. Mm-hmm. We can just boot the PBM out. Most medications in the U.S., 90% of them are low-cost generics. And people don't understand that actually the U.S. has some of the cheapest generic medications in the whole world. It's a competitive market. There's wholesalers all over the place. There's manufacturers all over the place driving those low-cost generics even lower.
So
we don't need to pay a middleman for a medication that costs $2. I don't need 3 people involved in that transaction.
Well, listen, ultimately, does this help or hurt you if this thing goes through? You wave that magic wand. Does a Park Forest Pharmacy not have as much profit by the end of the year?
No, the great thing about what I did is I kicked out the PBM.
I see.
All the stuff that they do, that's nonsense to me. I just talk about it because it's so outrageous.
Well,
it affects everybody's insurance, but for me, I'm unaffected.
Brad Hart, I appreciate you fighting the good fight, and nice job on, I think I found you on X or Instagram or somewhere on there, but it was quite compelling.
We're everywhere.
You are everywhere. All right, my best to your wife, and get back to work, would you?
All righty, thanks, sir.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.